I'm Nick Saunders, and I'm very happy to welcome you to Season 1, Episode 3 of How We Get There, Stories of Transformation and Redemption in Tech. This podcast continues to explore through my own experiences and those of my guests, the way that tech can change lives, alter trajectories, and give people space in this world that they might not have had otherwise. So I'd like to welcome my guest, Howard Holton. Welcome, Howard.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Thank you for coming. So hearing you speak about your journey was kind of the seed from which the idea this podcast grew, and you've had a remarkably early start in this industry, and I thought that was fascinating. So all good superheroes have their origin story, so maybe you could start off with sharing yours.
Wow. With that kind of intro, my origin story better be a really good one.
It's pretty good from what I heard, but
Yeah, so my parents, I was a nerdy kid. I was the kid that when you went, like, you look around for your children. Okay, so as a kid of the 80s, nobody kept track of kids. So every 5 hours, they'd look around and see where you were.
yeah.
And I was the kid that would be found underneath the stairs or in the corner or sitting on a rock outside with a book in my hand. I wasn't doing anything active. I was reading 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents, like all 80s parents, wanted to get me involved in sports and have me make friends and stuff. And so they bought me baseball cards and football cards and basketball cards and hockey cards. And that was fantastic for getting me into statistics, because all I really cared about was these things are a collectible. So how much value do they have?
Yeah.
My dad had a little IBM PC XT, and I built a Borland D-Base tool that allowed me to input the value of all my cards from the Beckett trading guide and then track month to month what cards I should keep and what cards I should get rid of.
Right.
Great. It did nothing to get me into sports at all. Matter of fact, I couldn't tell you anything about I had Dan Marino's rookie card and John Elway's rookie card and Montana's rookie card. I couldn't tell you what cities they played in at the time. And I couldn't tell you what happens in a football game other than there's obviously a winner and a loser and throwing balls and stuff. I didn't watch my first live game in person until 2013.
Wow.
Right. So it totally, completely, and utterly backfired. I watched 200 baseball games as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult, I took a book to every single one of them. I was at a game in 2006, maybe. And the pitcher's name is Kenny Rogers, which I only remember because of the singer. And he was pitching his very last game at Angel Stadium, right? And so we're there early. We're sitting front row on the first base side. My wife's a big baseball fan. I got great tickets. And it's me, my wife, and my daughter, who was 5 at the time. And I have a book out while this poor man is doing his last warm-up ever. And all of a sudden, there is a hand like this, right? A hand like this holding a ball right in between my pages. And I look up, and he's handing me his last warm-up ball for my daughter.
Wow.
And I mean, I'd say I was ashamed, but the book was really good, and I just liked reading it. But what ended up happening was my dad was a law professor and owned a law office, and he saw that I had built this application. He was like, "Hey, I'm having a problem with WordPerfect. Do you think you can help?" And I built a piece of software called Plead Perfect, that was watermarks and templating for law offices for WordPerfect.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing that was not a thing that was, according to WordPerfect, possible to do.
Yeah. And how old were you at the time?
I was 11.
You were 11. Okay.
Right. I was in 7th grade.
Yeah.
When I did that. He used it, and then he showed his friends who thought it was the greatest thing ever. And so we went to their law. He closed the law office, and we went from law office to law office, installing Plead Perfect and selling them Plead Perfect. And then I started doing networking because they wanted to do file sharing and print sharing, right? And it kind of took off. And by the time I was in the 9th grade, I started doing consulting for schools. At 10th grade, I presented to my own school school board, and I was their largest non-construction contractor while I was still in school.
Wow.
Matter of fact, I had a couple teachers. So a friend of mine and I, we kept some of the computers working because we wanted to play video games in school.
Mm-hmm.
And the it was really it's a really silly way the way schools got computers initially. They got them from a federal grant, and the grant bought the computers, but didn't keep them, but had no money for maintenance, so
Mm,
they'd all break. Just kind of the way it worked. And so we kept them working, and we got held held hostage by three teachers after class one day, and they said, "Hey, if you want to graduate, you'll keep the computers running." And my friend went, "Oh, okay," and I went, "No, no, my dad has the only law office in town. No, we're not doing that.
yeah.
Instead, I'll keep the computers running, and I get straight A's, and I don't have to do anything." And they
I
went,
mean,
Okay."
yeah, that's a pretty good outcome of a barter.
I mean, I was going to keep the computers running anyways. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to play video games, and so
Yeah.
they were like, "Okay, that works for us." And like people look at that, and the first, like, the common response I get from that statement is, "That's why the American school system sucks." No, it's not. There was nothing they were worried about me in high school. Matter of fact, I was a disruptive student. I read the textbook the first day I got the textbook, and then had the audacity to point out when teachers were wrong.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
a disruptive student. I was terrible.
And I think that that's kind of the way the education system is moving in that direction now anyway. It's find the skills and innate abilities that kids have and try and direct that into the way they're educated rather than it was a more of a one size fits all approach. I think previously you were disruptive if you read the books too early. I had that experience as well. I remember I had always read all the books prior to English class. They're like, "What do you mean you've read this?" I'm like, "Of course I have.
Right,
It's
right,
like important literature. Why wouldn't I have read it already?"
right. I'll be honest, I don't like Dickens at all. That was the one thing I learned in school. Like, I
Yeah.
really dislike Dickens. I don't like Victorian era writers for some reason. I find them overall depressing, and when they're not, they're too flowery for me. Otherwise, 100%, I would read all of it, right? And Shakespeare, I was a big lover of Shakespeare, so
Mhm.
when Shakespeare came around, I was on my 7th read of whatever Shakespearean play was that year's play, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
very similar experience. But it was really fun. And for them, they were like, "Oh, well, this just excludes a student I don't have to worry about anyways, for me having to spend time with them, and
Mhm.
that gives me more time to focus on students that I genuinely can help." Because Howard's a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna help him, and he's not really learning. Like, he's not learning a lot from my interaction, so he'll be fine. Was kind of their viewpoint, right? I can
Right.
now spend more time concentrating on students that wouldn't be fine.
Yeah.
So while at the time it felt like a huge win for me, it was a huge win for everybody. And
Mhm.
I had a ton of fun in school. I was not the most popular kid,
Well,
right?
that leads in well to my next question because, uh, a lot of what I associate with kind of the tech industry as I see it now is it's a community of practice, right? We're uniting for a common goal. There's a lot of networking, but also friendships. But from your description of your initial entry into, programming and creating these programs, it sounds a little lonely, really. Like it was just you were a kid and
Yeah.
creating all these things. So I'm curious when for you, you kind of found your fit.
uh, I think it depends. So in the like 80s and 90s, especially if you didn't live in a big city. If you lived in a big city, there were tons of communities. The computer clubs were really tight. I did not. I lived in the mountains. My high school was like 300 students for the whole high school. So my graduating class was 54 students.
Wow.
So there was that one friend that worked on computers with me, and we like professionally drifted apart very quickly. It was a very much a kind of, you know, lone ranger kind of thing that you did, right?
Mm.
Uh, and so I didn't find much of a community. Like, there was the hacking community that I kind of was part of on bulletin boards and that sort of thing. But I was kind of the lone ranger for a while, and that hurt me far more than it helped. Um, because I don't naturally, like, I'm on the autism spectrum. I don't naturally have social skills, and being a loner and like developing techniques that worked for me and allowed me to be good at my job was great for me, but it didn't help when it came to working with large teams,
Mhm.
right? And it took me a while. When it took me a while to kind of figure out that the team is the thing. It's not about what you can do. It's about what the whole team can do and how you can help support the team and how you can make the team better. That really makes all the difference in the world. And it took me a long time, probably 2002, 2003.
Right.
So I had already been working since '87. So if you do the math, I'm in some ways obviously a slow learner.
But I mean, with when it comes to neurodiversity, I think again, that's one of those. My son is on the spectrum as well, and he likes to talk about it as his superpower is that, he has these capabilities that other people don't have. And with that also comes, some issues with social cues and stuff like that. I'm curious for you though, would you call it masking now, or do you think that you've internalized that benefit of working with the team?
No, it's masking. It is a
Yeah.
superpower, right?
Yeah.
But it's a superpower that my day-to-day works through an interpretive layer,
Right.
right? I can't I'm not good at social cues when they're directed at me. The way I overcame to just continue to tell a story, I was the kind of most eligible bachelor in my little small town.
Mhm.
So I dated and married the most beautiful girl in a little small town who just wanted the F out of the town,
Mhm.
right? She was dishonest kind of with herself and dishonest with me in that all she wanted was out of the town. She didn't want me
Right.
particularly. It's not holding ill will. It just caused a lot of grief for the both of us.
Yeah.
My understanding of relationships came from romantic books and rom-coms. I didn't have a good pattern at home to follow.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the rom-com, nobody wants a romantic story. Everybody thinks they do, but there's not enough conflict in that, interpersonal conflict to actually show passion, to show that
Yeah.
that works. So it fell apart, and it fell apart horribly, and my friends kind of vanished, and my social network kind of vanished, and my life was destroyed in many ways. And I was left going, I did everything I thought I was supposed to do. Why did this fall apart? Why did this fail? The world has lied to me. And so I spent the next several years studying psychology, sociology, and anthropology in the same way that I studied technology. And that's when I really started to figure out how to work on myself and figure out and really realized that this thing that I have, mm, while it's helped me in a ton of different ways, it doesn't necessarily help other people. And that if I focus on that in the same way I understood technology, I could understand how to work with people, how to build that side of my personality because I was in fact incomplete without doing it. I was an
Mm.
incomplete person without doing it. Because it doesn't come naturally, it's always a muscle I have to work
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah.
The good news is I like working the muscle now. I enjoy it. I enjoy being able to be empathetic as a leader. I take massive joy in seeing the improvement that people that I mentor and work with and lead make. And I really like that ability now.
Mhm. And somebody like yourself, and again, this was, like I said, how this podcast kind of got started was with we were both talking about lifelong learning, right? And how both of us are hungry for that and kind of can't help ourselves. And I think it's interesting that you've turned that as a new aspect of your lifelong learning is learning how to interact with people and incorporate them into your work life and your personal life and understanding that complexity because it's probably the most unanswerable question, right? Is how do we deal with people and what can we expect from them? It's always changing and has so many variables, many more than baseball cards. So,
Yeah, 100%, right? When I went through that divorce, what I figured out was the reason I lost so many connections and so many people was I expected the definition of friend to be my definition of friend. And it's not. It's not. No one's definition of friend is reflected back at them exactly the same way,
yeah.
right? And so I set up an expectation for people that none of them could reach. And that was part of the learning, right? Part of the
Mhm.
learning was give of yourself what you're willing to give of yourself and receive from other people what they're willing to give. But don't set an expectation that it should ever be equal. Sometimes they will give you far more than you give them, and sometimes you will give them far more than they give you, and all of that is okay,
Mhm.
right? And that was the hardest lesson that I learned, and something that I see people do all the time. Well, I did all this, and all I got back was this, right? Well, think of it as a gift. Your time is a gift that you give to other people. Your effort and your energy is a gift you give to other people. If it's a gift, give it freely, and then you don't have to worry about it coming back at you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Don't lend out anything you can't afford to lose, basically.
Very true.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Yeah. So I wonder, like, in this industry, I think that there is probably higher rates of neurodiverse individuals. I don't know the stats. I haven't looked into it, but by my observation, I would say so. And I identify as neurodiverse myself. What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe struggling a bit with entering the industry as a result of their neurodiversity?
One of the things I love about technology is it's still rooted in kind of nerd mentality. And nerd mentality, once you get past the kind of initial gatekeeping, which drives me up a wall, and we could have a whole podcast on gatekeeping
Yes.
and why I hate it so bad, is
Yeah.
extremely welcoming, right? And technology it's an industry that's moving the world, right? No great innovation is going to happen in the next 50 years without technology being at its center and those who manage the care and feeding and growth and evolution of that technology. And so neurodiverse people kind of ended up in this field, and it's really interesting to see the anthropological reason behind it. So traditional, like pre 1950, it's probably a little earlier, but let's say pre 1950, the ideal mate hadn't changed since we evolved into Homo sapien, right? It was always the big, the strong, the good looking, the athlete that was the most appealing person in any societal group. And so and they were the least likely to be what we now consider neural diverse
Mhm.
people. And so you'd have someone who maybe carried the gene marry someone who didn't carry the gene, and so the gene wouldn't carry forward as a dominant trait. Around 1950, that started to change in small ways. And one, you started to have people that previously wouldn't find a mate started to find a mate because we started to have far more kind of white collar jobs that appealed to people who were neurodiverse. Being
Yep.
an accountant is a good example, right? Being someone that works in what we now call business analytics, someone who works with numbers can find great success starting at about 1950. Before that, it was very hard for them to find great success and thus very hard to be appealing for a mate. And as that continued to improve by about 1970, geek was chic, right? Now, people with these diversive talents could find really good work, really solid, really reliable work. And at the same time, people who didn't found themselves frequently being unemployed because those jobs would change, those markets would change. But I still need my accountants, I still need my lawyers, I still need my, whatever. And now I need my computer programmers,
Mm.
right? And so it drew in people with neurodiversity. And because they were now seen as being successful and they were very reliable mates,
Right.
right? The idea of alpha does not include a necessary focus on monogamy, right? And you tend to get a little bit more kind of boisterous, you tend to get a little bit more loud, you tend to get a little bit more behavior that doesn't lend itself to a wonderful home life. And yet, people found that those with neurodiversity, especially because they generally prefer to be quiet, they generally prefer to be alone, also lends itself to reliability at home.
Mhm.
And so you combine reliability at home with reliability in the workplace, and you started to see this pattern emerge of reliable mates. Well, while those who are not neurodiverse found them to be attractive, those who are also neurodiverse also found them to be attractive. And so now you had people that carried the gene uh, marrying each other and producing offspring that carried the gene in much higher rates, which is
Right.
thought to be some of the reason why we're seeing a spike in autism. Is
Mhm.
people who carried the gene are marrying people who carried the gene, and thus the gene exposes itself more frequently, right?
Yeah.
But it's also super interesting to see that change in society where these things that you used to be an outsider for are now the things that are making you successful in the eyes of people who don't have it. Right?
Mhm.
It's now seen as kind of a magic power.
Mm.
It's part of the reason the gatekeeping exists, right? People from my generation fought really hard to be nerds. That's not true. We were put in trash cans because we were nerds. We
Mhm.
were beat up
Yeah.
because we were nerds, and so we kind of carry that as a stupid badge of honor for no particular reason.
Yep.
So, a friend of mine says, effectively, the bullied become the bullies.
Mhm.
Is and he's right. That is a kind of a common human trait. And so, some of the gatekeeping is the bullied saying, "Hey, you were a bully. You can't come now play with us as though nothing happened." Even if it's a generic response, and I just don't like the response. But effectively, we now live in a world where geek is chic,
Mhm.
right? If you look at movies that are making millions that are winning Oscars, they're all about nerds and geeks that would have been shunned or were shunned if it's a biopic,
Yep.
right? Like Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was shunned.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's really interesting to kind of see that change. The
Yeah.
good news is the community is super strong and the community is super welcoming.
I have an anecdote about that, which it would have been around 1997. So I feel like that was kind of a pivotal time a little bit. And I wanted to play magic cards. I wanted to learn how to play magic cards. But I approached the cafeteria table where all the boys were playing magic cards, and I was like, "Hey, can you teach me how to play magic cards?" And they just iced me out. And it felt like bullying. It felt so
It was
bad, and
bullying.
it
Didn't
hurt
feel it.
my
It was
feelings
absolutely
so
bullying.
much. But then I went back and I spoke later with some of the individuals that were sitting at that table. Facebook is amazing. You're still in touch with a lot of people. And I was like, I remember that. And that really hurt my feelings. And his response was, we thought you were making fun of us.
Yeah.
So the perception, it was because it was such a time where I think it lay on that border of who was had the most social capital, shall we say. It was kind of a weird time. And, I can proudly say I'm almost 40 and I'm learning how to play magic cards finally. So that chapter is concluding. But I know what you mean about the
Mhm.
bullies, the bullied becoming the bullies for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's awful, right? Sometimes feeling bullied, you react in a way that bullies another person, right? To kind of
Mhm,
your point. I remember things like that happening, and you never know after the fact, was that person genuine that they wanted to learn,
mhm,
or were they gonna make fun of you? Because I promise it had happened. Maybe not to them, but it happened to me, right? Where somebody said they wanted to learn, and then they sat down, gave it no real effort, and then just made fun of us.
yeah, of
Right?
course.
It was just another form of bullying, or
Mhm,
or as soon as you said, "Yes, sure," why then it turns to, "Why would I wanna do this thing with you?"
yeah.
But and I think some of that has too much of a foothold. While I may have made a mistake with a statement I said, I do think, like, nerd culture is pretty open. In the tech field, we as a whole industry, we're still a little not welcoming enough to women. Right? I think that if you're a woman wanting to get into this field, and this is no fault of yours at all, you kinda have to have a little bit of thick skin. You shouldn't
Mm,
have to. I'm not trying to
yeah.
say that you should have to, but there's still too many people that don't know how to treat people in a respectful and honorable way. And it's unfortunate.
Mm,
Strangely enough, cybersecurity is the most welcoming to women.
that's
I see the most
interesting.
equal kinda offering there versus, like, traditional IT. Traditional
Mhm.
IT can be a little bit of a boys club, and I do not like it.
Do you think that's because that facet of the industry is kind of the fastest growing and kind of newest? Is that
Cybersecurity?
Yeah, like, I just wonder if because by virtue of it needing so many new people and it's burgeoning the way that it is, if it's being a little bit more welcoming.
Yeah, it also collects people that are, like, it's not only new and burgeoning, but it also isn't really welcoming to IT people that are fixed in their ways, right? Which I think has if you were to Venn diagram that, I think has a lot of overlap with the people that treat other people poorly,
Yeah,
right?
lack of flexibility and tolerance.
Yep, the lack of flexibility and tolerance, right? And the I don't have patience to teach you things, and then making assumptions that I have to teach certain people things more than I have to teach other people things,
Mhm.
right? And cyber doesn't have that so much. Plus, cyber has spent so many years where you interface with people behind a keyboard that you stop making assumptions about their race, religion, creed, sex, sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera. And so
Mhm.
it's just you're welcomed because of your skills, not because of really anything else. And that's kind of the bedrock of how cyber is founded. They were all everybody in cyber is kind of outsiders, anyways,
Yeah.
right? We all started hacking at a young age that that led us down a path of being kind of an outsider, and and then all of a sudden we're valuable. Now all of a sudden we're valuable and valued, and so there's this little bit of a dichotomy. If
Mhm.
we're valued and valuable and valued, then you can't complain about my hair color. You can't complain about my facial hair. You have to deal with the tattoos because my skills are so rare that it's just kind of like I don't know. It's kind of
Yeah.
punk rock in that way, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? And the
Well,
goal.
and I like that that confers over to other positions too, and when you have, like, a firm or anything like that where they've decided to be open because they need those people with those skills and what they can accomplish, then when it comes to the other people that they hire for other roles, that barrier to entry is gone as well for them, and it's kind of a great, you know, propeller of upward social mobility, right? When you stop looking at people for their appearance and start looking at them for what they can contribute. So I think that's a fantastic movement in the right direction for sure.
I agree. I agree. I like differing perspectives. I don't like an echo chamber.
Mhm.
Echo chambers almost immediately start to feel fake, and it starts to feel like you're wearing someone else's clothes, and the clothes don't fit, and they're kind of itchy, right? Differing perspectives always bring freshness. They always bring something new. They always bring something interesting, and they always force you to think about the decisions that you made or are going to make in a new light. It may not change the specific decision, but that new perspective shines new light on it, and exposes things that you only have one perspective. You only have your perspective.
Mhm.
And so this acceptance of neurodivergent people, this acceptance of differing lifestyles, this acceptance of kind of everyone, right? This kind of open door that has been created is absolutely wonderful for the industry.
Mhm.
And I really hope that we continue down that path, and kind of open the throttle and step on the gas, right?
Yeah. Yeah, maintaining agility means taking on risk, so people need to just start accepting that there's a little bit of danger in it, but more good than bad, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, inviting more people to the table is generally, has good outcomes.
Kind of. Well, sometimes you get to the point where, and I've seen this happen, where you invite so many people to the table that the only thing that you agree on is the worst possible outcome, not the best possible outcome.
Mm, yeah.
Right. And so I think it's important that everybody gets heard. I don't think it's important that everybody makes the decision together.
No.
Right.
No.
If we don't all agree on everything, and trying to make everybody happy generally doesn't lead to innovation.
No, like, democracy has its limits when it comes to decision making, right? Ultimately, somebody needs to be the elected official that represents everyone and
Right.
makes the decision and pulls the trigger.
Right. And you can be upset about the decision, but if you're not the but if you gave your opinion, you were heard, and the decision still didn't go your way, you still need to just support the decision until the next time
Mhm.
you're asked for your opinion.
Yeah.
And I will say that's a place I see a lot of mistakes being made, and I've made that mistake myself. If you don't support the decision, even if it's didn't go the way you want, the next time you may not be invited to the table. And so you really just hurt yourself, and you hurt the
Mhm.
organization in ways that that you sometimes aren't aware of. So
Yeah.
that'd be a piece of advice that I would give, right?
Yeah. I like that. Well, I want to wrap up this conversation, which has been great, with my final question, which is, Howard, if you weren't working in the tech industry, what would you be doing?
So I don't know, but I like to think that without tech at that point, I was studying to be an attorney. I like
Interesting.
to think that I would have gone through law school, figured out that this was bullshit, and just stayed in school and become a professor. Really like teaching.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to do. So
Yeah.
I like to think that's what I would do.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to our listeners for sharing this time with us. If you'd like to hear more stories and insights, please follow or subscribe on your favorite streaming service.
Yeah,
Thanks,
this has been
Howard.
a ton of fun.